Welcome back to New Realities. I am here again with one of my favorite yoga teachers, yoginis, Kim Tang. And, in her course of very intense practice, she has been, it's yoga's in what you're telling me in these dialogues is that yoga is not just an external practice, it brings somebody deeper into themselves. And within that inner discovery, you've made some great connections. So today we want to talk about this whole idea of chakras and whatever that really means. I mean, they're connected to the endocrine glands and they're connected to levels of consciousness. But I think you have some other insights into what they are actually about. So where do you want to start with this understanding of how you understand the chakras? Because some people say they don't actually exist, they're just ideas. So what do you have to say, and why are they so important for you in your practice?
Hi, Alan. I love it when you ask me where I want to start, because always I start with love and gratitude. Always, it is the highest frequency, and the gratitude I feel on this day is that I am feeling my feelings. We've got new moon with Mercury in retrograde in Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio. There's all kinds of stuff going on, and it's a great time for us to have this conversation. And so always I start with love and gratitude, and I want to thank you for having me back. And I also want to point out that you can, oh, go ahead, were you? I also want to point out that you can see that our conversations are like growing and gaining momentum, and they're becoming more expansive, but they're also fine-tuning and honing in. And so our conversations are both kind of micro and macro, and they're getting bigger but more specific. And I'm loving the opportunity to have a series of conversations with you, because then we get to do it like that. It's really expansive. So someone who might have watched the first one, which was called Yoga and Consciousness, might have gotten the impression that my conversation would be about how to do a deep asana or how to cultivate a deep practice. But then you can see through not only that Yoga and Consciousness part 1 and part 2, but then I think the third one we did was how to serve on a higher level. And that was through cultivation of that inner journey through the practice. And now we can get to really, I want to talk, I'm just gonna free flow this. I want to talk like chakra nuts and bolts. And the reason I say that is because, you and I were talking about how chakras are an esoteric, I'm going to say, concept that people have a hard time integrating, knowing how to interpret. So, we're all given kind of the stats, the statistics on the chakras, and we all know that they have a location and they have a color and they have a vibration called a bija mantra, and they're associated with, different aspects of the endocrine system. But I want to look at this in a very different way. And I want to make this not esoteric. I want to make this tangible, practical, functional, applicable. And I do, yeah, definitely. And I do have to say that just like any of the other spiritual arts and sciences, there's some intuition involved in interpretation. So, for example, any two tarot card readers would have the same card and have the similarity in the reading, but it would be left to their intuitive interpretation. And so I am going to, give it to you good, my intuitive interpretation of Chakra Diagnostics.
Right. No, I like that. I mean, they're intuitive, your insights, but they're also practical and they also are applicable. But let me just also start off by saying, and what I've learned, over the course of this integration of Eastern and Western spirituality, is that chakras really are states of consciousness, levels of awareness. So you have the lower, the first three are really your animal body, you know, survival, sex, power, or territory, however the animal. And then as you, this is just my quick interpretation, as you move to the heart chakra, you're now going beyond that just animal level, although animals do have quite a loving sense. And I think that's as high as the most evolved, is my prejudice against animals. The most evolved animals get to pure love, but they don't go beyond that. So beyond that is taking that love into expression. Maybe animals do that. And then vision, and then all knowing. So it's like, that's how I really learned it. So they're sort of ideological in that sense, and they may have practical connections to the endocrine glands, which I think they do. But I'm interested in the insights you've gotten because you're working with these concepts, these ideas, these practical applications every day. So tell me.
Yeah, well, I just want to add to what you said. Yes, yes to everything you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the idea of being divine in form, right, is that we're meant to balance our humanity with our divinity. So you have the Ida Pingala, in which case the Sushumna, the energetic channel where the chakras reside, is open. And so these things can be free flowing. And I wouldn't grade, I don't grade the chakras as far as the lower ones are lower in nature or frequency. In the way of being animalistic, I think it's really more like we're meant, yes, the lower ones are more symbolic of our humanity. Yes, the higher ones are more symbolic of our divinity. So what I think of, and what we'll get to, what I think of as the chakras being wide open, free flowing, and most especially imbalanced, is that we as divine in form are what I'm going to call tethered between the core and the cosmos. So quite literally, the feet firmly planted on the earth with the eyes to the stars, receiving from the collective. And I interpret that what we can do is do the work on the lower chakras as humans, divine in form, and the higher chakras opening, activating, and being free-flowing and balanced. That is the natural response and the indication that you have done the work on the lower chakras. So I think that that's the way I see it. And there's a lot of different language out there about chakras being blocked, or chakras being stuck, or things like this. And I used to have a different vision of it that I would really describe, and now I give a different vision with some different verbiage. So I would call it this. I used to compare it to, let's say, quite literally plumbing, a plumbing pipe that has, in this case, 7 valves, right? The chakras, obvious analogy. And each valve is opened or closed to some extent. And you can imagine that if you really were actually running water through a pipe that had all these valves that were open and closed to different extents, that the water would kind of flow in some places and kind of have resistance and be stuck in others. One would be robustly flowing, one would be, a trickle just being forced through. And so rather than talking about chakras as either being open or blocked or stuck, there's another language that I think is probably more an accurate depiction of them being either in balance, or we'll say underactive or overactive. We'll say, barely flowing or robustly flowing, maybe even out of balance, excessively flowing, And so I think what we're trying to do first when we're doing the work on our chakras is actually to get every single one of those valves kind of open equally, just balance things out a little bit so that whatever stream is flowing with fluidity, evenly and equally. And then we can start to just open each one a little more through our work. So
how do you open your chakras? And you you want them all open and flowing all the time, right? So how
Let's
would
save
you-
that for the end of the conversation. So
Okay.
what I want to talk about first is just a practical roadmap to, because remember, I've called this Chakra Diagnostics. And so what I'm telling you is that the awareness of chakras, not only your own, but in anyone you come across, and especially people you are in relation with, these things are discernible in not an esoteric way, but in a practical, tangible, functional way. And that's the first conversation we need to have.
Okay, let's
So,
do that because I don't know how they are tangible
yeah.
and observable. So tell us.
Yeah, let's do it. So obviously we're going to start at the root. The root chakra is seated at the base of the spine. It's called the Muladhara chakra. And if I'm going to describe these chakras as being qualities of being, then I can tell you that, oh, I did tell you that we're talking about everything being in balance, open and free flowing is a condition of being kind of tethered between the core and the cosmos with your feet firmly planted on the earth. Aha, now we start at the root with that. So I'm going to call the root chakra basically, or the qualities of the root chakra basically as being what I'm going to call like firmly grounded and connected to the earth and all living things that with which we inhabit the planet. So now we're not only talking about our own feet feeling the earth, but also our connection to all other human beings that inhabit the same planet, all life, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, the plants and the animals. So that feeling of not only feet firmly planted on the earth, but the interconnectedness and the inherent respect and realization of the sacredness of everyone with which we share the planet is something I'm going to attribute to the root. It's very much a chakra of, we'll call it survival instinct, your humanity, your ability to trust, your feeling connected to other human beings and living beings. These are all really important qualities. If you are underactive in the root, I would suggest that it might present in your life, in your relationships, in your patterns, and in your behavior, in your relationship with yourself, as feeling disconnected, feeling a sense that you don't belong, maybe feeling a lack of respect or an inability to trust that the universe will meet your needs, that the earth which you inhabit will sustain you. So you can already start to see that there's a lot going on there. The really low, I want to describe that too. The really low expressing root can present as things like greed, jealousy, possessiveness, resentment.
So you're saying all this, or we're disconnected with our survival base. It's because the chakra itself is not opened and flowing. Is that what you're saying here?
I am saying it, but I think I would take that sentence and put it in the opposite order. I would say that when somebody presents as feeling disconnected and feeling really insecure, untrusting, not belonging, these would be indicative that the root is, we'll say it, underactive. Blocked or stuck is a way that people like to describe it. And let me say this, because if someone doesn't know much about chakras, and this is kind of an introductory conversation, I think that some people think, and this is also the discernment I gave you earlier, some people think that the lower chakras are lower qualities and the higher chakras are higher qualities. But I want to be really clear about the way I differentiate. If a chakra is underactive, some people like to call it blocked or stuck. That expresses through some lower qualities of being. But that same chakra, when it's in balanced, open, and free flowing, can express in the higher aspects of those qualities of being. So what we're really looking at now is the comparison of closed or open, balanced or imbalanced, whether it's something like, I don't trust anyone, you can't trust anyone, you can't trust people, versus everyone is my friend, you know, and unless or until I have a reason, you know, that they aren't. And, you know, they would be kind of different, bless you again. They would be different ways of expressing actually the same chakra and indicative of maybe the flow of energy, because remember, we're talking about flow of energy through the spine, through these nadis or subtle energy channels. That would be important. So yeah, let me see. If we go
let me just ask you one question. What comes first, the attitude or the chakra flow? I mean, you know, you say it's indicative, or they happen together. If you're, you know, distrustful, is the second chakra out, or does the distrustfulness cause the first chakra, I mean, to be out? I mean, or is it co-evolutionary?
I think they coincide. And yeah, somewhat. Have you ever heard there are no coincidences, only the incidence of two vectors coinciding? So, but I think that they are synchronistic as your consciousness, and ultimately, because remember from our first talk on how yoga is consciousness, and I said the consciousness with which you conduct your practice is the same as the consciousness with which you conduct your life. Learn it on the mat, use it in the life. As the consciousness gains awareness, increased awareness toward these things, the energy starts to flow. So if anything, I'd say that it happens first. I'm going to have to say that it happens first on the level of the mind. And the reason I'm going to have to say that is because a minute ago you said, well, how do we open them? And I said, well, wait, that has to come at the end of the conversation. And that's where we're going to talk about some of the things that we've already alluded to, which is, I'm making my notes now to make sure we come back to it, which is the causal, the astral, and, you know, and physical form. All of these begin on the causal level, right? Because remember, we've already talked about we're vibrational beings in a vibrational world, and this is just thought identification. It's a consciousness that presents as density of form with some flowing of energies. And anyway, let's stay here with chakras.
Let me ask one question. So if you open the chakras, the attitude changes. We'll get to that later, but is that how it works?
Yeah, I think that they flow in both directions. Okay. As you lighten your load, so to speak. Because remember, raising your vibration has to do with primarily letting go of a lot of things that are holding it down. Most of spiritual expansion is about letting go of things.
Right.
Different conversation. Let's have that sometime.
Okay.
So I think that as your consciousness changes, the energy starts to flow. Remember, energy flows where attention goes. That's Reiki. That's yoga. We've already even talked about that as well. But also, as you do the work on the chakras, then you have a new desire to see things differently, to kind of drawing from some other teachings. So if we can start to see some of the indications through being in relationship with someone, through our patterns in our lives and our ways of communicating, we can start to see where we might be free flowing, where we might be out of balance, underactive, overactive. Oh, and by the way, speaking of that, you know, I mean, whether or not we're drawing in physical manifestations, the root would be kind of an indication of the imbalances of the root would be things like compulsions and addictions. Remember, that ties into the fear that the need won't be met and desiring overconsumption, or by contrast, deprivation, self-deprivation. Those would all be indicative of the root, that's where the
root chakra. That is all root chakra. Okay.
Yeah. Definitely. So if we go to the second chakra, which is your sacral chakra, or it's called the sex chakra, sex center, I have a very expanded purview of what that means. I interpret it to mean far more than the sex center. It is quite literally located at what I would call the womb. And therefore, it is the seat and the source of both creation and creativity. But I'm going to call it something more than just that. all of us, me, you, and everyone, possess our own proportions of what we could call masculine and feminine energies. We could just as easily call it yin and yang, because then we can start to see balances and imbalances. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to call the second chakra, rather than the sex center or sacral chakra, something like this. Are you comfortable with the balance of energies that exist within you? Now, because now we can, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, but now we get a much bigger picture and a bigger purview of the variety of energies that present in any human, and how maybe historically or classically we were rejected for not having something that was the approved upon standard or value. So the question is not, if you present as female, are you predominantly feminine energy, and vice versa? No, the question is, are you comfortable with the balance of energies that exist within you, no matter what they are? Are you comfortable in your own skin with your own balance of energies as they express? Mm. Are they in harmony? And then there's the interpersonal balance of energies of, are you comfortable? Are your balance of energies able to be in sync with and be in harmony with others' balances of energies, right? Because this is not only an inner journey, it's an interpersonal shared journey. And the more balanced we are, the more expansive our purview, the more we love and accept ourselves, the more we love and accept others. And all of this, to me, is seated right there at the second chakra. So there's also, oh God, I'm super happy I get to say this right now, because right now we are literally kind of going through and defining qualities or characteristics of each chakra. But what we start to see is the chakras themselves are all interrelated and interconnected. Right. Because I'm about to talk about intimacy and trust with the second chakra. But when we get to the throat, it's all about trust and communication, which is the highest form of intimacy. So these chakras all work together. So maybe, when you ask, does it start at the head and go through the spine? Does it start at the wheel and go to the mind? It's both. When the channel is open, the wheels are spinning, and they all relate to each other. The energy flows through, right? Just like maybe that water line and pipe analogy.
Right. So go through the second chakra again, just so I understand from your perspective.
Yeah, well, I see it as a harmony and a balance of energies that exist within you and between you and others. This seat of source of creation and creativity and your ability. Oh yeah, I'm feeling it. And especially on this day, like your ability to be really, and I mean really, seen intimately.
Yeah.
This is about the third time that trust is going to come up. Do you trust someone enough? Do you trust yourself enough? Are you comfortable enough with yourself to be able to handle intimacy? Right. Can you be vulnerable and be seen in that way? So, and there it's a quick and easy escape to things like body issues and body shame and whatnot. But I'm going to suggest that that's not about the body. I'm going to suggest that that has more to do with what I always call your relationship with yourself, in the context of allowing yourself to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to be seen, allowing yourself to trust another. And what we're ultimately going to get to is that it doesn't require the trust of another. It requires you trusting yourself in the highest level. That's definitely what we're going to get to when we get a little higher. So is that, did we cover it enough, or do we want to stay here on
well,
this?
Let me just see if I can summarize the first two. So the first chakra, the root, is your relationship to the world, in a sense, your relationship to embodiment, your relationship to trusting the universe in general. And then you come to the second chakra where you want to trust yourself and trust another, and harmonize the reflection of the inner and outer. I mean, something like that. And I mean, there's so much more there, but that's sort of what I'm getting here. You're talking about relationships in these first two. I mean, different forms.
Well, yeah, your relationship with yourself.
Right.
And your relationship with others.
Yes.
Definitely.
And the world itself, and the world as we embody it.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's sort of what I mean, there's a lot more you've said, but yes, let's keep moving and see how it all comes together.
I'm going to do something funny. I'm about to turn the camera because I can hear someone at the front door. Let me see. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'll stand for now. Okay, so the third one that I want to talk about is the solar plexus. This is a biggie. Is everything fine with the move I just made? Can you hear and see?
You look great. You can highlight your hair.
This is a biggie. The solar plexus is what I'm going to call your vitality, your eternal life force.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to call it before this life and after, not just the, say, 85-year span of this incarnation.
Right.
And therein lies what I in yoga always consider what I'm going to call your connection to your power, your connection to your strength. And, you know, the way that you would, that's my interpretation, because what you would typically read in any classic textbook on chakras is your ability to, I'm going to call it, pull something into form, your ability to manifest, to make thought become matter. And that, to me, is connection to your power, connection to your strength, as evidenced by maybe your ability to manifest. But we're not talking about just things, that's for sure. So there is quite literally your Hari Om, your source of strength to tap into. And so here's where we can get into a really specific conversation about chakras. And that is that when somebody is not connected to their power, connected to their strength, connected to their vitality of before this life and after, then that can present as quite literally them feeling, I'm going to call it, as opposed to, okay, how about this? Because impotent was the word on the top of my mind. I want to say disempowered. As opposed to feeling empowered, they might feel disempowered. They might feel, I want to say both, hopeless, helpless, like they don't have the ability to, they dare not dream.
Dream.
Because why would they dare to have a hope for themselves that they didn't feel? You can feel that, right? That they didn't feel they had the ability to create a tangible condition in their life.
So power is related to your ability to manifest or not. So if you're not manifesting your dreams, would you say you're having a problem with your third chakra, or is it? I
don't want to leave it the way that you proposed it,
because right.
Yeah, listen to this. I want to go back to our first conversation when we talked about yoga and consciousness. And I want you to remember that what I do is I literally help people change, not just their body, but their mind, so that they can literally create the posture of their dreams and bring it into form. And that happens as much on the level of the mind as it does on the level of the body. It happens on all the levels. Now we're talking again, third chakra, because let's say, for example, and this is common, it's very common for me to say to somebody, and believe me, I'm coming from some knowing in the way of what I'm asking them to do. And I'm always asking them to do either something that I know they can do, or something that they have to reach just a little bit for, but if they reach, they will get it. And we've already talked about that as being a real formula for success. But with that comes a consciousness of connecting to your power and your strength. And now we're talking third chakra, solar plexus. So when we're talking about manifesting, people tend to think stuff. I'm not talking about stuff. I'm talking about what I would say is far more important, far greater than stuff. The ability to be deliberate about the creation that is your life, whether it's, you know, in my case, a schmancy posture, or in your case, being, you know, a robust producer, a prolific producer. So
or
sometimes
maybe it's where you're creating your living, like you've just created a beautiful space. So
yeah, that's in the works. So the thing is that sometimes I'll ask someone to do something and knee-jerk response, I can't. Wait, yikes, right? You definitely can. I'm asking you to do something that you can do. And now hear me now, because now we're talking. When I'm asking you to do something that in fact you can do, but you're not quite yet connected to your power, connected to your strength, connected to the potential, the full potential that exists right there at the source of your being, eternal being before this life and after. If you're shutting that down before you even try, then I'm no longer even working on a posture. I'm working on the consciousness and its connection to the third chakra. Now we're talking. So I'm constantly, continuously helping people connect to the power, connect to the strength. And that could be indicated by their willingness to what I call start where you're at, do what you can, always and only with breath and with form. And I give you something to do. And remember, that's what I'm really good at, is seeing exactly what you can do and where you're at, even and until and before you can see it for yourself. So when I show you, when I tell you and show you something that you can do, and then I have you reach just this much farther, and then you have to reach for it, but you reach and you get it, and then millimeter. We've already talked about that as being the formula for success, but now I'm going to talk, success in posture attainment, but now I'm going to talk about it as a formula for opening that third chakra, connecting to your power, connecting to your strength, not letting fear stop you. Right. And just, and this, by the way, you know what we're talking about now, Alan? We've had so many good conversations that we can refer back to now. Now we're talking about neuroplasticity, because we're talking about what I call send the command from the brain through the spine without the thought obstruction. And you know what that takes? Willingness. And you know what willingness takes? Letting go of fear. And you know what the net result of letting go of fear is? Connecting to your power and connecting to your strength. And you know what that is? That's your third chakra. So I'm super happy right about now that we've had all these conversations that I now can refer to. Now we can talk about, you know, all these things that we've already referred to and alluded to.
Yes, beautiful. I love how you pull it all together, because these conversations are a weaving of consciousness. It's a weaving of qualities of yoga, I would say, because yoga is more than the body. It's an evolution of consciousness. People do yoga for the evolution.
To open their chakras, to get the flow of, we've talked about this a number of times and in a number of ways. And we talked about it as the flow of energy through the spine. And remember, we talked about, you know, the great yogis are sitting in the Himalayas and it looks like they're, you know, doing nothing. But what they're actually doing is being deliberate about the flow of energy through the spine, in and up, to become seated in, you know, what we might call enlightenment or the Christ itself, or, you know, the highest aspect of being as divine in form.
Right. No, I like that understanding of the third chakra, the power to manifest, you know, and we'll go into, if people are not manifesting, what their dreams are. Someone in the chat says here, I would love to have her work with me. I feel like she would actually get through. That's Amy in the chat there. So
I do a lot of this. Can you tell me the first name of the person who typed in?
Amy, she leaves her whole name, so it's Amy, Gingell. So
okay. Amy, thank you. I do a lot of this with a lot of people. It's and it's not even something I do. It's actually who I am. That's what Alan and I have been talking about. And I don't know if you saw the other interviews, but definitely check them out. What I do is I talk about self-cultivation leads to service, and then I share myself with you in the form of the work that I've done. And the beautiful thing is that Alan asked, like, he asked for the punchline in the first 5 minutes. I'm like, no, we'll get to that at the end. So we'll talk about kind of how to, because knowing this and having the information is one thing, but knowing like what to do with that information is a completely different conversation. And we can talk, oh yeah, Alan, we can talk about that, but I have to tell you, it'll be a part 2 for sure. Cause that's a,
okay.
that's a long conversation.
That's fine. No, thank you. I think people are happy when you address.
But Amy, I'm available and I'm easy to find. And so
how do people find you though? If you're easy to find, tell them how.
Well, the kimtangyoga.com platform is nearly live. I've been promising you that for a long time, but it's a vast platform. And so it's taking a little longer than I thought, but also Kim Tang Yoga on Facebook, Kim Tang Yoga on Instagram, Kim Tang Yoga on YouTube. And I'm really easy to find. So PM me, DM me, you know, and I'm in the high desert, Joshua Tree area of Southern California. So I am available. It's my highest mission statement is to be as generous and available as possible to as many people as possible, in as many ways as possible, on as many levels as possible, for as long as possible.
Beautiful. That is a beautiful.
So Amy, thank you. Thank you. I got you, girl. Okay, we're here. Okay, so root, check. You know, sacral, sex center, check. And solar plexus, probably my favorite one, check.
Let me just ask you about the sex center. What does that have to do with sex? Because you really didn't. I mean, you sort of mentioned that.
Yeah, everything. Intimacy. Alan, I mean, I don't want to, you know, is it a G-rated? Can we speak?
Yes, please. It's X-rated. No, it's whatever you want to say.
What could possibly be more intimate than not only your deepest knowing of yourself, your deepest realization? And by the way, honesty is going to start to be a really important conversation. But what could be more intimate than not only your relationship with yourself, but your ability, look, for you to have the deepest relationship with yourself and to share that communication expression with somebody else who, especially somebody else who has that deepest realization of themselves. The deeper your realization of yourself is, the deeper your partner's realization of themselves is, the deeper the connection between the two of you can be. And what could possibly be more intimate than not only knowing that within yourself, but allowing that, you know,
beautiful
within you,
with your body.
And so on the subject of sex, there is something that I want to say about literally sex, the act. I want to say that for me, in its highest form, the communication of intimacy, trust, and connectedness on the deepest of levels, the action of the expression of it is the natural response of the feeling of connection. The action is the natural response of the connection. The action is the natural response of the feeling, the indication of the feeling.
Great. So, that is something to really remind everyone about. The act is a natural response to the feeling.
Boom. Yes. Yeah. And not only that, think of the irony, because we're talking about balances, imbalances, underactive, overactive. What I cannot help but notice is that if we're talking about, and I mean, what, I don't want to keep saying not to digress. If we're talking about this, we can talk about this, but we'll have to have more conversations in the future. Think of the, let's call it polarity. Think of the opposites, extreme opposites of something like Tantra. And I'm going to say that the extreme opposite of Tantra would be something like pornography.
Right.
And what I want to tell you is that my observation is that many, I'm not going to say most, and I certainly would never say all, but many of the people with whom I have these conversations that are very, very comfortable with, in fact, enthusiasts of pornography, are not comfortable with intimacy. They seem to be in polarity because, again, one is an act and one is inspired by a feeling. And the feeling is not as superficial, it's that most profound, deep, and meaningful feeling. So, yeah. So the question is, I mean, I guess therein lies the question of.
No, I think you're very clear about that. No, I think it makes sense, and people should be taught that relationship to themselves and others, and that exchange of energy and that balance. And then we wouldn't need pornography or anything like that, you know?
Yeah, I really never impart judgment. In the biggest spiritual picture, there can be none. But it's really, oh God, I love that led to this. In this picture of this conversation and the biggest picture of maybe what would be our highest expression of divine in form, which is what I'm going to just keep coming back to over and over. The balance between our humanity and divinity, being tethered between the core and the cosmos, is more like to get all of these chakras wide open, balanced, and free flowing, because then we are so connected to ourselves, love and trust, that we can connect with others through love and trust, through honesty and intimacy, and all of the things. It's just let's take that and roll into the heart.
Yes, the heart. I was thinking about all these other chakras are great, but the heart is the most valuable or important or sacred, if you want to call it something like that.
Well, it's I think the heart is right there at the center of between the humanity and the divinity, right? It has a stronger electromagnetic frequency than the mind.
Right.
And when we start to talk about, I think that we actually talked about it a little bit last time when we talked about how to serve on a higher level, how to be of service to humanity. I talked about intuition and being in service as being so attuned, by the way, to yourself and to another through yourself, that quite literally, instead of hearing with your ears, you're hearing from your heart. And instead of seeing with your eyes, you're seeing with your Christed eye. That is where these chakras really also come into play. The heart is not, to me, indicative of romantic love. I would call it a higher level of love of humanity. And now we're already crossing over with root, right? Connectedness, ability to trust humanity, love of humanity, compassion for humanity. So when I think of heart, I think of what I might call a higher level of love that is selfless. And by the way, that ability to have compassion for others, remember, self-cultivation leads to service. This comes from the ability to have self-compassion. So you need to be kind to yourself on deepest of levels to be able to be truly kind to someone else. So it's something that you do the work on yourself, by yourself, for yourself, with yourself, so that you can then turn your work in service for others, with others. And again, that's how I think we serve, is what I said to Amy, sharing yourself with someone else in the context of the work you've already done. And that probably is why I feel so comfortable and confident having these conversations, because remember, I spent, and by the way, never done, never there, right? This lifetime, it's a progression. And as soon as you get one lesson, I will tell you the next one comes. It never, so far, for me, it never stops coming. But you learn how to navigate, you learn how to ride the waves, and you learn to recognize the lessons that are the indication of what's active within you that, have come into your field through your own manifestations. Remember connecting to your third, hey, connecting to your power, connecting to your strength, connecting to your eternal life force before this life and after is a very, very, very high level of what I'm going to call spiritual accountability that I will say with pure compassion, many people actually simply are not ready for. So now we can start to look at how connecting to your power and connecting to your strength. Yeah. And so an indication of being disconnected to that would be a bit of kind of a pattern of being a victim in your life, right? Feeling that you have no choice, feeling that there's nothing that you can do, disempowered, disengaged, I don't want to say disconnected, because then we're looping back to the root, but they're all connected, aren't they?
Wait, but what I'm not getting about the heart is the sensing that seems to be most real. I mean, there's sensing on every level, the root, the sex, the power, but there's something else that happens when you get to the next level. And so
Definitely.
I'm not hearing you really describe that. I mean, maybe you are,
Okay.
but.
Do you, you know how in every single talk we've ever had, and every talk I ever have, every relationship I have, everything in my life, I always express that I begin with love and gratitude, because love and gratitude are the highest frequencies, right? This is the heart chakra. This is centered and seated in love and gratitude, where there is, I better make those notes. Here's the thing. If we say that love and gratitude are the highest frequencies, then we're bringing in compassion, which, remember, all of these qualities present in any number of forms. And it could present in being gentle, being kind, being grateful. And by the way, I guess I'll say it now, because it's just right there in my mind. This is not a teaching of convenience. And what I mean by that is, it's not that, I'm spiritual as long as everything is going the way I want it to. I'm spiritual as long as I'm in a good mood and happy, It's not like that. It's at all times. As a matter of fact, we're getting a little ahead to the throat. But what I want to tell you is, even and most especially, the hardest moments, the most challenging, the most uncomfortable, even the most painful, are the most important. And even and especially those can be met with love and gratitude when your heart is open. So even those, especially those, can be met with compassion. And again, vulnerability, honesty, allowing yourself to remain vulnerable as we get into the throat, connect to the truth, come from love, and feel safe to say from compassion, from love. So can you navigate this terrain with your heart open?
would you say that the other chakras, in a sense, well, they don't make sense unless you have the heart. So they kind of flow down and up from the center out like that. Because what's the point of all those others if it's not um, embodied in the sense of compassion?
Word. Amen. What's the point of all the others?
Right.
Yeah.
Or even the higher ones, because they
Yeah.
all come back here.
To the heart. So, hence we commonly use the phrase and hear the phrase heart centered.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, that's as it should be in the highest form.
For
Yeah.
humans, anyway, for this form, I think that the mechanics of being, if we can call chakras that, the mechanics of being.
Yeah, I'm making some notes because I love where we're going with this. How about, can we get to throat?
Yeah, let's keep going. Yes, of course.
Okay, listen, this throat chakra is where these, it's my favorite place to give these examples of what I call diagnostics. Mm-hmm. So let's just concentrate for a moment on the throat chakra. Okay. And I know that it's commonly known and held and accepted that the throat chakra represents maybe the way that you express, interact with the world, the interface of the way that you communicate, what you do communicate, what you don't communicate. And what I have expressed to you in some of the other talks, I can't even remember which one it could have been, because this is the best place for it. Now you can hear me in the context of this conversation. So look at one thing that I'm going to call, with respect to the throat chakra, one thing that I'm going to relate to it is what I call spiritual integrity. And now we can start to look at behavioral patterns and maybe behavioral pathologies or tendencies, or your relationship with yourself in the way of being able to express and communicate. Mm-hmm. So how often do you see that somebody's thoughts, words, and actions are not in sync? So in other words, think of how common it is that you think one thing, but you say something else. Or you say one thing, but you do something else. Or most often, you feel something that you don't say. And now we get really into relationships where something is kind of a permanent fixture in a relationship, and it's not actually really okay with you, but you never really say anything about it. That's a throat chakra right there. Or how about this? You say one thing, but you do something else. You know what we could call that? Passive aggressive tendencies, right? Let's talk about, and now let's start mixing up chakras. Let's talk about throat, heart, and the sex center. How about that? Boom.
Well, they are all connected, right?
They're all connected. And when you start to look at them as qualities of being, you see how interconnected they are and how they all relate to each other.
And if one is off, you would saying it throws the other ones off as well?
It lights up across the board in all the different centers of our aspects of being, all of our qualities of being. So remember, when we were talking about the second chakra, I talked to you about intimacy, and I said to you, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself, because in a weird way, intimacy is really as much about the throat. Oh, isn't that interesting? Because it's commonly known that, the throat, and in the case of a woman, the vagina, are the two portals of expression, right? The two openings and outlets and inlets of the body. And so, of course, they are deeply related. They're deeply esoterically, intrinsically related. Mm-hmm. So look at, what did I want to say about this? Yeah. When I talked to you about before, I think it could have been just a private conversation of us as friends off the record, but it might have been in one of these recordings. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. But we talked about how the hope that, for example, the hope that I have for myself is the hope that I have for everyone. Mm-hmm. And it's a conversation about chakras. It's that we are all fully expressed on every level of being as in our most authentic truth. Right. And Did you want to say?
All I wanted to say was I hope go back to that when you finish this point, that example of how the throat, the sex, the root, the power are all interconnected and they all light up.
I think that this second half of my sentence is actually probably going to address that, and then we can expand upon it. So when you're in conversation, I would say every conversation, and I would say especially every conscious conversation, every contribution you make, which quite simply means every verbal response that you give, or every neurolinguistic, physical, body language response that you give, is a contribution. It's the outpicturing of your consciousness. So to be fully expressed on every level of your being means that you have a thought, a perspective, a purview that you give voice to as a contribution. You have emotions and feelings. And therein lies our conversation about authenticity. Yeah, we have to do that right now. Authenticity, I think that we touched on it last time, but now's the time to expand. Mm-hmm. What we do as, humans is that we feel a certain way, but we sometimes discredit, diminish, deny the feeling because we override it, we squelch it, stomp it, stash it, because we feel that we shouldn't feel that way. We're not entitled to feel that way. It's not a good look on us to feel that way. And so we not only don't express the way we feel, we deny the way we feel even to ourselves. And you cannot keep secrets from the universe. That is an energy that exists within you that will manifest in some way at some point. As a matter of fact, I would suggest that that's the emotional root cause of disease, diagnosis, injury, illness. The longer and the more you deny your feelings, which are always telling you the truth, the bigger the blow is going to be. When the circuit trips, I'll call it like that. So authenticity. Oh yeah, what we do as humans is we feel a certain way, and instead of us, I'm going to call it simply caring about how we feel, honoring our truth, and even not only honoring it, not only connecting to it and honoring it, but coming from love and feeling safe to say. Because now you get into things like, oh no, I say everything, but do you say it combatively? Do you say it defensively? Are you uncomfortable with confrontation? These are more indications of a block here, a block there in the flow of that energy. An overactivity, maybe you're aggressive, overly confrontational or combative. Maybe you will never give voice to your feelings, underactive in that chakra. So what I'm saying is, can you connect to your truth? And with all the balance of your heart, can you come from that vulnerable love and feel safe to say? And that is your authenticity. And when we get away from our authenticity, when we come into inauthenticity, it's when we're denying the truth of that feeling and pretending that we don't feel it, not honoring it, not expressing it. We're not being authentic to our truth. So when I'm talking about all of these chakras being fully expressed, being fully expressed through robustly balanced and flowing chakras, it means that you are connected to your most authentic truth, and they're all in balance. The energies are in balance, and you can come from love and feel safe to say without being defensive, without being.
If they're not in balance, talk about if they're not in balance.
Well, it's the things I was just talking about. It can present as being aggressive or defensive or in denial, or, any of those imbalances of anything other than because remember, this is beautiful. It starts within you. It's a self-cultivation thing. And if only you care about your feelings enough. And remember when you asked me what was the best advice I had ever received? Now I can kind of talk about why. I told you that some of the best advice I had ever received was from someone, a mutual friend, who said, please, he said, please make every single decision, no matter how big or how small, from what you have to breakfast to who you choose to love in your life, make every single decision as if you loved yourself deeply and completely. And I'm going to suggest that that is, if there was a one-liner in this conversation, that probably was it. Because when you are caring about how you feel, loving yourself enough to connect to your truth and come from love and feel comfortable and safe to be able to say it, because, okay, here's the throat and the second chakra. Here's another answer for it. Because honesty is, I like to say, honesty is the deepest form of intimacy.
Yes.
And now we're looping back to multiple chakras because people, okay, let's talk about why people don't feel that they can be honest. Mm-hmm. And that does not just mean what is the true source of a lie being told, but it also means something in a relationship is just not okay with you, but you just don't say. That's another form of dishonesty. Dishonesty to yourself, by the way, first and foremost. So if only you care about how you feel enough to be able to be comfortable, to connect to the truth, and instead of saying, I shouldn't feel that way, I shouldn't say anything, to connect to the truth, but in the balance of energies come from love, not from, overreacting, being aggressive, defensive, and right. Feeling safe to say, because when people lie, it's because they are afraid they're going to lose something. If I tell the truth, I will lose something. And whether it's something that they perceive of as stability or security, or whether it's this person will no longer love me, this person will no longer like me, what this person might think that about me. Behind every lie is a fear. And so if you can actually trust someone enough, and again, remember, ultimately trust yourself enough to connect to your greatest truth, your deepest truth, and come from love and feel safe to say, that is a beautiful demonstration of trust, to be able to love someone enough, more importantly, love yourself enough to be able to be really honest with your feelings. And again, what could possibly be more intimate than to let that be truly known, coming from love, even and especially in a place of fear or vulnerability. And sometimes the fear is not even of losing something, but just of being seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Vulnerable.
You see how these are, yeah. So for me, the most robustly, fullest expression we can have as divine in form is to be fully open and free-flowing and in balance and harmony with all these energies and qualities of being that exist within us, and to be the most authentic version of ourselves as we possibly can, and in the balance of that, to connect to the truth, come from love, feel safe to say, and to be willing to share, and to see and love and be vulnerable. And by the way, you know what, here we are at the third eye. Right. Because remember how when we were talking about yoga, it seems like a long time ago, we were talking about yoga, we were talking about doing postures, doing yoga, as like a stretch class in a hot room, an exercise class. And, I was just laughing, saying to you, there's, body is a learning device for the mind, but there's way more to yoga and doing yoga and taking a class than just doing postures. So remember, I said to you that when you're looking, when you're practicing in a class that has a mirror in it, you're looking directly into your own eyes so that you can learn to see yourself and love yourself exactly as you are. And by doing so, you can love others exactly as they are. You can see the truth of who they are in their highest form, not what they would have you believe, that they're unworthy, that they're unlovable. These things are not true. As an aspect of the Creator, you are perfect and you are lovable by virtue of your divine birthright, and you have nothing to prove. You don't need to convince anyone, much less yourself, of your inherent divinity, which is, again, pure love. So yeah, to be seated here is to see the truth of who is to to be the truth of who you are and see others as the truth of who they are, even and especially when they can't see it for themselves, to not hold them in a place of judgment, to not give with an expectation of return, to not project expectation. Oh, and by the way, you know something really interesting is that when you're seated in that third eye, mind's eye, sixth chakra, Christed self-consciousness, you're in your most present state. There's a direct correlation. Wow, all the bells are going off right now. There's a direct correlation with your sixth chakra being open and your ability to be fully present. I call it pure time. And by the way, not only to be in pure time, pure present moment, but for every aspect of your being to be in pure time, present moment. So you're not running a second track in the back of your mind of being elsewhere, doing other than right here. I am right here, right now. I am right here, right now with all of my senses. I am right here, right now with all of my presence. And I am right here, right now with all of my awareness. And by the way, without the personality self, the thought identification, the projection, you know, they say, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. Without the projection of personification, without expectation, without judgment, right here, right now, I am the truth of who I am, and I'm seeing you and connecting to you as the truth of who you are. And there can be no judgment in that space of love. Field of trust with no judgment is what I called it to you last week when we were talking about how to serve. So when you're in this shared space as your highest self, in however you want to call it, you're in service, period. You're in service to humanity.
From this space, I mean, something also happens when you go to these higher chakras. It's less about oneself, and it's more about sharing higher and higher levels.
Okay. So when you said it's less about oneself, I went ding, 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 root chakra, connectedness, not only to the planet, but to all living beings that share the space with you. The interconnectedness of all things. I am you, right? And we've talked about I am you, we are one. We've talked about that like in many different ways now. We talked about it as yoga is union. We've talked about that probably in every conversation that we've had. And so here it comes again in a different form. But I am you. And Alan, so this time now, just give me the space to get all the way through it. So give me your eyes. And let's just no live stream, no nothing. Just give me your presence and your awareness. Give me your engagement. Give me your attention. And let me actually see you. And I want you to actually see me.
I see you.
And now let me say to you something that I said before. Let me get
You
all.
and feel your passion. No, I'm just what I'm seeing is what I'm feeling is your passion and desire to express and in a way be there for people with what you've gained. So I'm seeing that as you.
So now be with me and let me say something to you now that you can feel it. And now that we've had so much conversation that you hear it a little differently. And now we're talking about the root is open and, you know, the second chakra is open, the solar plexus is open, the heart is open, the throat is open. And here we are. And now hear me now, even though I've said this to you before. When I see you as love. And when you see me, you can see me seeing you as love. And when you see me seeing you as love, you can now see yourself as love. And when you can see yourself as love, Now you can see me as love.
Yeah.
And everything has to be open all the way through in order for that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of loops back to the last conversation. And thank you for that space. Thank you for that space to be able to impart that message with all of its gravity.
Let's keep that space. That's the only space to really exist in. So
thank you for saying that, because now we go back to this, this topic, chakra diagnostics. When you start to be able to decipher different tendencies and behaviors and, all of these things, what you can start to see is people are primarily seated in a certain chakra. And the more that we get, remember, the energy in and up through the spine, then we can really kind of clear some, open some valves, I like to call it, clear some blockages, whatever it is. And now we get everything kind of more robustly free flowing in and up until we are centered here. And that would be maybe my best original definition of what it means to be enlightened, is the highest expression of yourself. All of the chakras wide open, free flowing, and in balance, so that you're seated as the highest aspect of your being. With the consciousness of love, the consciousness of forgiveness, the consciousness of the very biggest picture, where you actually can just, I call it, there's apparently a facial mannerism that I have that is commonly known by people that know me. They call it the slow blink. And when I'm listening to someone and maybe they're crying about being unlovable or unworthy, and those aren't the words they're using, but that's what they're saying to me with all of the details of their lives. And sometimes I just look at them and I'm just kind of just loving them and not believing that they're unlovable and not believing that they're unworthy, even though they believe it and they've been told it and they've manifested it and all of these things. I will never believe you when you tell me that you're damaged. I will never believe you when you tell me that you're broken. I will never believe you when you tell me that you're unworthy, no matter what the circumstances were. I will never believe you when you tell me that you're unlovable and you've got nothing to prove. And I will not. We started talking about field of trust with no judgment. This level can only happen in that field of trust with no judgment, right? So trust, did we or did we not talk about trust in the root? Trusting the universe.
Well, trust on every level we've talked about, really.
We talked about it in the second. We talked about it in the third. We talk about it in the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. So you can start to see they're all related. And when they're free flowing, trust flows all the way through you, from the bottom to the top, from the top to the bottom. Love all the way through you, from the bottom to the top, from the top to the bottom. That's the energy, the highest aspect of being, the highest qualities that flow through you. By the way, known as that, and the energy centers known as the chakras.
Right.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being so passionate, because you're an example of that flowing through on all those levels, because you're bringing it all together to then express and feel and bring in that higher level into expression. So let's go to the crown, because that's where it all really comes together, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I'll go back to being tethered between the core and the cosmos, and I really see the crown as receiving from the collective. When they're all open, remember, we are, in my purview, we are both receivers and transmitters, right? And tethered between the, oh my God. So now we're talking about like a Tonglen meditation, like a Reiki, like how to heal the earth and the planet, how to be in service to humanity on all the levels, is to actually be that literally conduit, that both receiver and transmitter, receiving from the collective. So if I do want to say this, I didn't plan on saying it, but here it is. Do you remember when or did we talk about breath work? And I talked to you about that crazy breath work, meditation, chakra activation, healing meditation that I kind of crafted, that had a lot of receiving the lower qualities and offering them to the planet for dissipation, and then receiving from from the, the core of the earth through its crystal caves to the root, the highest aspects of humanity for dispersal. And then as you go higher and higher, so at first you're kind of having that relationship with the planet itself until you get to the higher chakras, and now it's the collective. So not only gathering kind of the lower qualities of being from the collective and offering them, or from humanity, I should say, and offering them to the collective, but then receiving the highest attributes for disbursement, not to take it into your being, but to be a vacant and a vessel and a channel, to gather all the negative for dissipation because the universe wants that, and then to receive the highest aspects and disperse it because humanity needs that, and to use yourself in service as that channel that is the transmitter, the receiver and the transmitter through the crown. That's when you're wide open and free flowing, you're a far more powerful and effective receiver, and therefore transmitter of a higher message, frequency, vibration, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, something like that. That's the way I see it.
So I see that, but now, I mean, I don't know if you're ready to talk about that punchline, but now that we've labeled it, identify it, how do we bring it into balance? Because it's great to map the territory, but how do we maneuver our way through it?
I like it. I like what you say. Here's what I want to do. I want to give the answer exactly, but I want to give the brief version. And then,
Okay.
Do you remember when you asked me, it was like the first one, and you were like, oh, we got to talk about spirit. We got to talk about, give me a quick, example of spiritual assignment. And I was a little like, oh, because I said to you later, like, oh, I don't really do 5-minute jobbies. There's like a lot to talk about there. So I want to give a really exact answer, and with the promise that we have a future very, very expansive conversation. Because if it was that brief, everyone would know it. Everyone would do it. It would already be done deal, right? But in human form, we really trip ourselves up a lot. We don't know how, right? So now we get back to, there's a note that I made that I have to dot my I here. I made a note about intuition. When we are all fully connected to ourselves and to others through ourselves in pure presence on every level, and attuned to not just the senses of sight and sound, touch and taste and smell, but to our feelings, then that's what we call intuition. And the more present you are, the more intuitive you are. And that's why intuition resides at the third eye chakra. So, okay, now dotted that I, we're done with that. And remember, we talked about causal, astral, and physical. So we are.
What did we say about the causal, astral, and physical? Just review what we said about it.
We are 3 bodies of being, like nesting eggs, those little Russian nesting dolls. Remember, if I believe that we are vibrational beings in a vibrational world, and so, but yet I look like solid form. I look like, this Kim is contained inside, this body. And then there's blank space between us. And then, somebody else is contained within their body. Then what I want to tell you is that this is simply density of vibration. And the density of vibration that presents as, Kim Tang is actually what I'm going to call thought identification. And thought identification is something that you and I have talked about, but it's also thought identification combined with those balances of energies of masculine, feminine, we could call it yin and yang. And that is what presents as density and form. And that is what we would call through the left hemisphere, egoic identification of self as separate, or call it your humanity. And so that is the source. Remember when we talked about yoga and I said it's not actually body centric, it's not even spine centric, it's mind centric. It starts with that thought identification. And that's just this personality as it presents in form in this incarnation. This conversation could quite literally expand to include things like precognitive agreements, but then that would be a continuation of before this life and then maybe even after. So you have an idea of who it is that you think you are. And that idea was bestowed upon you in many ways. And that's the way that we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. You take that idea of who you are with your combination of experiences that you've navigated through free will, by the way, to gain a historical account of what will be based on what has been. And that's the way that most people navigate the terrain. And so in the shortest form that I can give you, because if we start this conversation now, it'll be two or 3 or 4 hours. So let's make it concise, and then we'll close and then we'll have another one. In the shortest form, we start with thought identification, precognitive agreements, and taking what I'm going to call some spiritual responsibility for circumstances. And then we start to navigate the terrain with some increased awareness of that information that we gather through that work. And we start to be more authentic to our truth and care about how we feel and pay more attention and, understand why it matters that we navigate with more consciousness. So, and, in the way of practices, what do you do in the way of action? There are peaceful practices that involve nature and connecting to the earth. There are breath work and meditation practices, yoga practices, servitude practices. These are all the 8 limbs of yoga. I mean, the answer to how do we open our energy centers and be our highest versions of ourselves, all of those answers are the 8 limbs of yoga, the do's and the don'ts, right? Everything.
So, but you didn't exactly answer the question if there's a out of balance for a particular chakra, if some symptom is coming up like distrust or survival or disconnection, what is there to do about that? Because if one chakra is out, they're all out in a sense, because we're one unit. So just, you don't have to go into an in-depth thing, but give us some practical advice to deal with.
Well, practical advice, the work is called work for a reason. And it's inner work. It's what I'm going to call deep sea diving, but it's deep sea diving that can actually be facilitated. That I do that. As a matter of fact, I kind of started by talking about Mercury in retrograde in Scorpio with a new moon. I got literally 4 calls in the last 2 days of people that are just like feeling the feelings, and feeling a little out of balance with the overwhelm of the circumstances of the life. So anyway, the answer is going to be to get to the core feeling of, no, I'm not going to say the core feeling. I'm going to say the core belief, because the feelings are in response to the thoughts and beliefs.
Right.
The feelings are the indication of the thoughts and the beliefs. So on the level of the mind, which is why I said, does it start at the mind to the chakra to the mind? If I had to pick one, I say it starts on the level of the mind with your thoughts and beliefs about who it is that you think that you are and your relationship with yourself in the context of your life. And to understand the areas where you feel that you're not lovable, where you're denying yourself, not loving yourself, not caring about how you feel, not connecting to your truth, feeling safe to say, coming from love, not in fullest expression, not connected to your power, not connected to your strength, afraid of intimacy, not able to speak your truth, not able to trust.
So if that's all happening, you're afraid of intimacy, you're afraid of speaking your truth, where do you turn that around? How do you?
What I do is I start on the level of, I should say, in my capacity, in my service to humanity as someone who can just facilitate and hold space for you through that spiritual growth process, through the journey of learning to love yourself, accept yourself, forgive others, realize in the biggest picture that there never was anything to forgive, and so on and so on and so on. It starts with, for me, it starts with conversations. And I want to tell you that sometimes in these conversations, I will literally say, I don't even need to know any details at all. The circumstances are only the symptoms, right? But sometimes the details start to become more relevant. But again, looping back around to the last conversation, being able to create that field of trust with no judgment, and remember, coming from a place of compassion and love, and being my highest self, seeing them as their highest self, and helping them find the blind spots and the areas that need to be forgiven, that need to be accepted. And there are many ways to do that. But I think what you're trying to get to is it starts with conversation when I'm helping someone else.
Well, it starts with the conversation when you're helping someone else, but if someone is listening to this program and they're not having that conversation, they want to get some clues, some gems to help them with it, manage it on their own, so.
Okay, here's what I want to, because managing on their own is the inner
Or
journey.
get to that place if they want intimacy, if they want love, if they want connection.
Yeah, here's what I want to offer.
Yeah.
I want to offer this. Do some mirror work. And the mirror work is as simple but not easy, but as simple as this. Create some space for yourself where you have time without distraction of a schedule or a fear of being interrupted, even if it's literally 5 minutes or it could be an hour. I like an hour. You already know that about me by now. And literally sit in front of a mirror. That's it. And see yourself. And what I mean by that is, remember we talked about before, can you give yourself your undivided attention? Most people can't, won't, don't. And can you actually see the truth of who you are, see yourself, and know that you are lovable? Even though you felt that way, know that you are worthy, just inherently by virtue of your divine nature, even though you don't feel that way. Can you just sit and be? Can you sit with your feelings? I'm going to tell you something for sure. If you can't sit with your own feelings, you can't hold space for somebody else to sit with theirs, and much less support them through it. So remember, it's all about self-cultivation. And so if you wanted like one and one only short and quick way to get to the truth of who you are, sit and eye gaze with yourself. Be with yourself, love yourself, forgive yourself, trust your feelings, trust your intuition. Know that you are worthy of not only being fully expressed as the truth of who you are, but being loved for exactly that. And know that what you want for yourself is what you want for another. And that when you have that for yourself and somebody else has that for themselves and you have that together, then there is the connection. And, on and on and on, all the things that we've talked about. These are all it's just no longer an esoteric conversation. It becomes the most important, profound conversation in the way to live your deepest, most connected to yourself and other life.
Right. No, I think, yes, that really helps. I think my problem has been intimacy. I'm trying to get to that place where it can flow more. What do you suggest there?
Start with the eye gazing in the mirror. There's a fear of being unlovable. There's a persona. There are multiple masks that we wear, right? Just by virtue of humanity. Not you, everyone. There's, now I'm being this and now I'm doing that. And here's the way, remember we talked about it before, the way I want to be seen. And there's a mask that we wear so that we only present what we want to be seen versus the mask is hiding what we don't want to be seen, because there's a fear behind that. And that fear is that we're not lovable, we're not worthy, again, the conversations and the layers. And it's not something that we can give in 5 minutes, but I think that the shortest and straightest way to get to yourself is to look straight into your own eyes. And then when you can hold that space for yourself with no judgment, with some compassion and some forgiveness and some kindness and some willingness to see the value and the love and the worth and all of these things, only then would we be able to actually gaze into and upon the eyes of another with the same high level of space and love.
And know, what you're saying is, no, I'm lovable. No, you're lovable. Just because we are, because there's, we sleep, we take care of ourselves. That's a form of love, of lovability. And so it's sort of the mind that's in the way of understanding ourselves, because we are already that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like that's, I feel like in a weird way, I certainly have never said this to you before. I feel like in a way we are complete. I feel like anything beyond this is the start of an expanded version or, a different conversation or something.
We'll do more expanded versions of this, but in order to just sort of wrap it up and sum it up and give people that little piece of wisdom that they can start to take home and work on. Yes, look in the mirror, love yourself, appreciate everything you are, and the joy of embodiment. But is there anything else that you want to just give?
Yeah, I mean, what I feel like saying when I hear your words is the way that you navigate your life. And remember, I'm talking about everything that presents in your life, all of the circumstances. And so I would call that like sifting through contrast, navigating the contrast of your life.
Wait, say that again. You would call it what? I missed.
Sifting through contrast.
Oh, okay.
There are things that you like, there are things that you don't like. You judge this good, you judge this bad, and it's all, your judgment is largely guided by who you taught you were and how you feel, by the way. And by the way, the word should. Now there's a conversation about the word should. That's a liberating conversation right there. So when you're gathering information about your point of attraction, the indication of what's active within you as evidenced by the manifestations in your life, and I know that that's like kind of a mouthful, but I think anyone can kind of sense the gist of what I'm saying. Then if you look at something that you like, you can consider that confirmation from the universe. And if you look at something that you don't like, rather than giving that your full attention, you might ask yourself a question. Okay, if I don't like that, what do I want? What do I want? Or if that, like, why is that okay with me? That's not okay with me. You've got to learn to hear your voice, trust your voice, tune into your feelings, love, yourself enough to care about how you feel and feel safe to express those feelings. And these are all ways to be more authentic in a higher version of yourself. So pay attention to how you feel. Care about how you feel.
And don't be afraid to express it. And don't be afraid to express how you feel.
Well, remember, connect to the truth and come from love and feel safe. So it doesn't mean be overly combative, argumentative. There are a lot of times you see people that go, oh no, I speak the truth. But it's a little bit like, what they mean by that is they're overly critical, condemning, judgmental.
Well, that's not love. If they're coming from
so it might be the truth of the way that they feel, but it's not coming from love when they say. So that would be an indication of the imbalance of the energies. In fact, they're actually uncomfortable.
The truth from love, you're saying.
Yeah. Which means remaining vulnerable, even, okay, hear me now. Remaining vulnerable even when you want to put your shields up. Holy, schmoly. Takes some consciousness to be able to remain vulnerable, honest and sincere and come from love and not put your shields up. That right there is scary for most people.
One more question. I know we're wrapping up here. And this is a whole other conversation probably, but do you believe there's chakras above the body? 8 chakras, 9, 10,
sure.
12.
Yeah, there are many chakras and many dimensions of being, right? And many layers of our being and levels of our transmission of being.
Of our energy body. So that's a conversation I think we should have at some point.
Excellent. Okay.
Well, thank you, Kim Tang Yoga. Another beautiful expression of your passion to connect, to communicate, and to serve. Really, it all wraps up. This is our 4th conversation we've had together, so you can look up Kim Tang on New Realities, but also Kim Tang Yoga. Your website is coming soon, right?
Yeah, it's not, the reason for the delay here is it's not even a website, it's an entire platform. It's everything I do all in one, and it's kind of the one-stop visit of knowing where I am, what I'm doing, enrolling, inquiring, inviting, anything and everything there is on all the levels that I serve and in all the ways that I'm available. It's all going to be consolidated to the one platform. And so bear with me, it's nearly there.
Great. And we maybe will have these ongoing, maybe once a month or something as Please come. I do appreciate your just boom, your energy. You have all that yoga has paid off.
Thank you, Alan.
You are an incredible yogi for sure. I mean, just look her up, look up Kim's pictures. You'll see her expression of her, in a way, deepest desire to know the body, to know the mind, to know the spirit, to know the self. So
Beautiful. Thank you for that. That was well said. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Thanks for
We'll
your
talk soon,
time.
okay? Thank you, Amy. Thank you to the listeners. By the way, thank you to the listeners for supporting the channel and do support the channel. So I really get behind what Alan is doing here. He's also a receiver and a transmitter of a very high vibrational message in service to humanity. So thank you for what you do and who you are. And I am very happy to be a contributor to this.
Yes, thank you for you're my go-to yogi here. So thanks, Kim, for just being okay. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thanks.